Yeah, my name is Samuel Abada. Yeah, for this class, like this session, the topic is environment variables, major basically, right? How to treat environment variables in your Flutter application, right? The native way of attending to environment variables. What are the various ways by which people attend to environment variables currently, and what is the recommended way, and how would you like to hold it going forward? Yeah. So that's the basic outline of this class. What environment variables are, why we use environment variables, how we attend environment variables, and the recommended way of handling environment variables. So yeah, without further ado, let's go into the class for the day. Let me see. I want to share a window. Um, all right. So without further ado, um, let's proceed. So we'll be creating a basic Flutter application, right? Nothing, nothing deep about the application, just to see how environment variables work. So yeah, so I'll be creating a simple Flutter app. Um, Let me see. Um, PMV test. Mm. So I'll be using Flutter 3.13.1. I think the latest Flutter SDK family is 3.13x. Right, so I'm using 3.1, and I'll do a Flutter create. Oh, so FVM is Flutter version manager. I use FVM to manage my Flutter versions. All right, so I think I have a couple of different Flutter SDK on my machine. So I use FVM to manage everything. I check it out. I think fvm.app. You can check it there. So Flutter creates class 100 and iOS. So creating my application. Hmm. So let me locate the projects. And the tests. Right? Yeah, so we have a basic Flutter application here. The Flutter counter app. Nothing, nothing different. No biggie. So let's just run it. So while it's running, let's discuss the various ways by which we attend to environment variables today, or at least various ways people attend to environment variables. Um, the most very common, right, is using third-party packages and dependencies. Um, Something like Flutter dot. .env, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so Flutter.env is one way by which people manage their environment variables. So it says easily configure any Flutter application with global variables using a .env. Um, so people have keep their .env at the root of the project. Then they add this to their assets. Then they use this package to read the .env file, right, in the application, and they call the values using .env. Then they load the environment name. This one by which people attend to env files. Um, some other people use something like I think it's env5. Yeah, env5, right? Which has been deprecated even for env or env. This sounds like env in my head. Um, yeah, so it's basically use code, it could generate code generates on annotations, right? So you add the env package to your PubSpec YAML, add env generator as a dev dependency, then basically run the command that helps you with your env thing, and then you call env.key, env.key to give you the value, right? So different approach to handling environment variables, right? But then it doesn't have to be so, right? Because the Flutter engine gives us a way to attend to environment variables without all these third-party dependencies. Yeah. So what are environment variables? Let's start from the very basics, right? Environment variables are variables that you can set outside your application that you can use to convey configurations to your application. Things as simple as you could keep things like API keys, API based URL, right, as an environment variable. It might be a database URI, right? But something as simple as your pay stack public key when you're implementing like pay stack, right? That's like an environment variable. It's a secret, right? Um, yeah, cases where your app is flavored, you have maybe a dev, staging, and production flavor, right? Different configuration settings for these flavors also stand as environment variable. Take for example your base URL for your API for the dev environment, for the staging environment, and the production environment might be different, right? So these are configuration, right, are particular to the flavor, right? So they can sit as you know environment variables. Yeah, our sample app is up. Let's um, go back to let's go back there. Yeah. So there's no big thing here. It's a simple counter app. Um, counter app. All right. So the Flutter SDK give us various means by which we can attend to environment variable. So one of them is yeah, all right. I'll zoom in. Um, hopefully this is better. Yeah. So I just run the Flutter help command. So the Flutter help command is just a simple help command that helps you to print basically information that will could help you out, like commands you could pass to the Flutter CLI, right? All right. So running the Flutter help, we have the command that define and that define from file. That define says additional key value pairs that will be available as constant from the string dot from environment, boolean from environment, and int from environment constructors. That's defined from file uses a config JSON or .env. It says you pass the path of a JSON or env file that contains key value pairs that will be available as environment variables. They can be accessed using the string from environment constructor, boolean from environment constructor, and int from environment constructor. We don't have a double dot from environment constructor available in that SDK. So, summary: the Flutter engine gives you a method to pass in your environment variables at compile time. At compile time, meaning when you want to do your Flutter run or your Flutter build, right? You have to pass these commands to set the respective environment variable. So this is what we call setting environment variables at compile time. Um, ideally, right, the way we set our environment variables across whatever platform you are working with is as simple as either it's Flutter, either it's JavaScript, either you can be backend engineer. You want to call whatever variable from the environment, right? And or you could set the variables at compile time, right? Not at runtime. Set it at compile time, then at runtime you fetch the variable. So how do we use this command? Very simple. There are two things. We have two different commands. Let's not forget. We have the that define command, which says you pass the key and the value. However, when you have multiple environment variables, you use the that defined from file, and you define the environment variables in a .json.env file. So how do I look at it? A very quick example, I'm going to do a flutter run command, and I am going to set app name. Like, let me use app name for example. This title, let's change it to string, but from environment, the name should be, let's call it app name. You can see we have nothing there at the moment, right? Because the environment variable app name was not defined at compile time, right? So what you want to do, here's a simple way to run this application and pass the environment variable. So we say ignore the FVM, right? So you do Flutter run, right? That's be fine. App name equals I use env test. So we let the CLI do its thing. So we're currently running Xcode build. So let's let's hold up and trust the process. Yeah, and there we have it, env test, right? So we pass a simple environment variable called app name, right, to our application env test. So that's a very simple case, right? There are cases where we have more than one environment variable. Oftentimes, we have more than one environment variable, right? Something as simple as, I don't know, maybe stack public key, um, API-based URL, and whatnot. So we could have multiple environment variables. There are two ways to attend to such. The very first one is the same way we had passed app name, right, we could do similar, right? That implies that we will do the Flutter run that define variable one, then another that define variable two, and it continues like that, which is problematic. Now I'll show why it's problematic. I've killed the fact running instance. Um, so if I have a second variable, I will do that define. I want to be sure that we can all hear me.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. I say this URL as https talk.com. Let me use this for example. So if I have multiple that define, this is how we do it. So if I have two that define, two environment variable, I'm going to do that define variable one, variable two. For n variable, that's multiple that define commands, which is cumbersome, very very cumbersome, and you should not do that. So what does the Dart engine advise you to do? It says you should use the Dart define from file command, and you should create a JSON file or an env file holding those configurations. How do I know that we have the correct base URL? You see, base URL. So, okay, look, yeah, that is so base URL, right? That's very correct. And of course, that means back to app name. Let me say this file. Yeah, env test. But this are very cumbersome. So the Dart engine asks that you use the Dart define from file command to handle such cases. How do we do that? We create a simple JSON. Let's call it config. Please ask a question. Please ask a question. You're on the list. I'll proceed. So we create a simple JSON and then we define all our environment variables there. So I'm having the app name, keep the name here. We also have say base URL in it here. We also have API key, right? Keeping it here. So base URL, let's see. github.com, app name, env tests, and API key, some random key. As I said, we create this file where we define all the environment variables. Then we pass it at compile time. So how do we pass that? What we do is similar to what we have earlier, but this time the command is that's define from file. So we have that define from file, right, at config.json. Yes. The name of the file necessarily does not have to be config.json. It could be anything. It could be this file name could be anything, right? But having the .json extension. So this file also could be anywhere. It necessarily does not have to stay in your project's root. It could be in any directory, right? As long as you pass the correct path to the file, yeah, you are good to go. However, it's always advisable, right? And when you are developing, you keep this file in your project root, so you don't lose track of where you manage your environment variables. So yeah, let's confirm that what we have works in demo, and then um, let's see, what should we do? Okay, so let's have a simple column of text that shows all our environment variables. So what do we have? We have three environment variables, if I remember correctly. We have app name, base URL, and API key. Okay. App name, app name, base URL, wait, all this. App name, base URL, API key, base URL, and API key. Right. So how do we read this? We said we read it by using the what string dot from environment constructor app name. Why do we have red here? Come back to you. Similarly, for base URL here and for you here, API key is base URL. So all these guys, changing setting is behaving, but it's fine. Anyway, it's fine. Okay, so um, let's check back. App underscore name, base URL, and API key. Since we have made a mistake somewhere, what's good? Oh, it's available. What's wrong? Hey, something has gone wrong with our SDT. God will devil be with us. Amen. Okay. So what's going on? But looking at this, since we have our we have this available. App name was not injected. That's one. How about the base URL itself? It's available also. How about API key? That's not available. Must have made a mistake with our command earlier. Let's repeat it. We have a config.json right in the project tools. That gives us that defined from file. Trying to do a dot slash. Do I need that now? think we have a, think we have a problem somewhere. Maybe this is help again. Not sure what has gone on again. Um, which one? Yeah. So I'm trying to look at the doc again and see what's happened. How I missed the spelling somewhere or something. It says that defined from file equals to. Okay. How do we try? Replaying the command. Connecting. All right. Yeah, please ask your question.
Okay, thank you, Samuel. I wanted to say, is it possible that the keys were printed to the debug console when you ran the application?
Well, I'm not sure of that, but we'll check. We'll check now.
All right, thank you.
To answer your question, no, it was not. It was not printed there. It was not printed there. Yeah. It was not printed to the debug console at all. So I think we have two problems in our hands. Um, let me see. We could have a broken command for .json files instead. Where .env files are fine. But let me try it out with env files instead. So a simple env outing app name base URL and API key, env text base URL and API key. Similarly, same command, right? You run Flutter run that's defined from file and specify the env file itself. So we go .env and then yeah, it's Flutter. It sets the IDE settings. Then let me see. I think something is wrong somewhere. So I think I need to confirm. Let me see. Is it tools argument? So I'm trying to see if I can specify the tool argument right from the editor. Fine. From file dot json. Um, yeah, let's see. So I need to confirm. Oh, yeah, that kind of that's problem. So that's the environment variable actually. But must have been the way we used to confirm again. Okay. So let's see. Let's happening. Yeah, value, base URL and API key. String base URL and this and then the API key itself. Right. So base URL and then here the API key. All right. Yeah, so here we have them. Um, so yeah, we have the app name, API key, and base URL all injected from the environment. And this can be used method and unused variable. Index. So, yeah, you are used. You are not useful. Yeah, yeah. We've passed our environment variable as as config.json, right, down to our runtime. I think the same thing happens when you work from the terminal. I'm guessing one of my environments is faulty, which is why I'm having issues here. But similar command, Flutter run that's defined from file config.json, right? Um, yeah, you could also work with .env files directly. Oh, so yeah, it's works now. Yeah, so it's the same thing. I'm running from the terminal this command, right? Or for those of you that use VS Code, you could pass it as a tool argument to your launch configuration. I think Android Studio uses some other format which I can't remember now. Um, check I remember. I think it's I think Android Studio uses workspace. Yeah, workspace. So you can also add it as an additional argument to your Android Studio workspace. However, if I'm working with .env file instead, I want to do similar command, right? But the env file name itself, right? So I have a .env file present here, right? This is what I'm going to pass to my command line argument. So running this, I should still see these variables. Let me close the application totally. So let me go uninstall this. I have uninstalled it. You should run it now. So let's see how it's worked out. Install. Why are you taking forever? So apart from being able to call environment where I'm not sure why this S could be used forever to run, but then apart from being able to call environment variables or set environment variables as compile time without needing external package or dependency, there are other advantages or there are other superpower, right? That the Flutter engine gives you by working with environment variables natively without using a third-party dependency. I'm not sure why this guy is still compiling things. Should have done by now. Things just do a simple Flutter thing. Then here's the Flutter clean and run the project's technical.env file. Hopefully this guy does not use forever also to run the SQL bit. Yep, so the same thing, right? We have passed the .env file here, filter one that's defined from file.env, and then we have the environment variables as defined here in the env. Okay, so yeah, notice we did not bundle this env file as part of our assets in pub/spec.yaml. We did not do any of that. We did not install any third-party dependency. Flutter engine just give us a way to do it without stress. Yeah, so they are what I call super powered variables, right? Super powered environment variable. One thing with environment variable in Flutter, right, out of the box is that you are also able to call this environment variable from the native side. So either from the Android side in your Gradle or from the iOS side in one of the plist files. But I'm having an iOS emulator here, so let's see. I could do so. The way to call environment variable from environment variable passed as runtime, right, to the native side is very simple. If I want to call the app name itself, I could go as simple as using app name here. So dollar sign and app name, the name of the variable itself. I mean, app name, yeah. So I could do something like this, the app name itself, right? Because this environment variable are loaded directly to the device. So um, similarly for Android, you could also load an environment variable from inside your Gradle. From inside your Gradle. So I could go somewhere like, let me see. I could come in here and then call variable from the environment, right? How is that useful? How powerful is that? Take cases where I'm working with Google Maps. Oftentimes, when we have work with Google Maps, right, we use the Google Maps API key, and then the Google Maps API key always require that in my Android manifest, right, I come and specify some metadata that carries the API key. It's always something in the format, always something in the format of remember correctly. Yeah, this is something like this. Com does Google Android Geo API key, and then you specify the long string of API key, right? You might not necessarily have to do that. One way to attend to it is by passing this API key as an environment variable. So what you will need to do is you pass the API key down to your env file. Let me use Google Map. Map API key, right? Some long string of a very long string. Then, secondly, you want to come natively and read the environment variable. And how do you do that? From my build Gradle, what is this? App level build Gradle. From my app level build Gradle, I can read any environment variable by just doing, I just call it the variable name basically. I just call it variable name. So I set a resource value, right, of type string, and then maybe I want to call it Google Maps key, for example. Google Maps key. And then the value is the key that was specified in the environment variable. So I could just set that key here directly, right? So what this does is basically the way Android build system works is resource values, right, are created in a resource folder, right? Which often finds is here. This is the resource folder, right? So when I create a resource value and I say string Google Map API key, so on compile time to create a strings inside values. If you don't have string, if you create that strings.xml and then keep this key there, right? So what I just need to do is I just need to go back to my Android manifest and then call the Android value as string, then the name of the key which I've specified there in the build variable. Don't forget, the most important thing is this key, this Google Map API key, which we define inside our .env file. So like this, a way to pass environment variable from as run as compiled sign down to the native side. You can also do other crazy stuff as simple as maybe your app name itself. Cases where your app is heavily flavored, right? I can have an env file that has the app name. Okay, we have an app name already here, right? So what you want to do to set the app name, you could do something as simple as similarly a resource value of type string, right? App name, which variable is called app name, and from the environment variable app name itself, right? So this creates a resource string called app name, and the way I can use this is by going to my Android manifest and replacing the app label itself. So I could do, so where I have this Android label env test, I could just do something as simple as similar to this, as string from the string resources give me app name, right? Yeah. So cases where your app is heavily flavored and you have an env flavor for dev environment, for staging environment, for production environment. This can really help you because even you can pass things like your app package name here. I think it's called package name if I remember correctly. Yes, application ID. You can pass things like your application ID even from here. Application ID become dot example dot env test, for example. Yeah. And then I go in there inside my build ready, right? To call it. And this time, since it's inside the Gradle directly, I will just name it, give it, call the very directly application ID. Get application ID, the ID are set down in the environment variable. So I don't need to do any extra. So basically, I can pass configuration, dev configuration, staging configuration, and production configuration right from environment variables and properly call the variable in here, and they will all set themselves without problem. The same thing applies basically to the iOS bits. iOS bits, where you need to call those variables, are usually in your plist file, right? And one example plist file we tend to work most of the time is the info.plist, which we have here. So to call an environment variable is the same thing. The environment, just a dollar sign, right, followed by the environment, followed by the name of the key of that environment variable. It could be app name, could be, yeah, like this. So anything really, anything. So it could even be bundle name. It would pass something like bundle name. Let's even test it out, try it out. Um, let's try iOS display name. What was the three parts? Let's try the bundle name and iOS bundle name. env tests en already name is env tests. Then I could come down here to the display name, iOS display name, and then the iOS bundle name. So this guy. All right, so yeah, let's compile it and see if it works as expected. Similarly, we pass .env, right? LVM Flutter run, that's defined from file.env, and these are all the env. So let's, yeah, so we run the command, and we wait to see if it runs or not. If these values are not properly set, right, we're going to have problem with our build, right? So we should not play with our build, and we should be able to call the environment variable from the Flutter end, from the that side. Yeah, I think that's a good one, from the that side. Let's see. So yeah, our app run. So how do we know that these are well set? Let's see. Our app name is still env test, right? The display name, which we have set here, iOS display name, right? This is env test. We could change it to env tester and see if that handles well. Should this handle? Let's see. If it blows up, fine. If it runs, fine. Let's see. Yeah, that there it is. So as you can see, we have it there. env tester are specified in our environment variable, iOS display name env tester. We have it down here, which we have set in here, iOS display name. So we know that it works on the native side. So yeah, from the dark side, as simple, calling it is very simple, like we've been doing since. Um, iOS display name and bundle name, right? String display name and then bundle name itself. Mm, bundle name. So it says this iOS display name and then the bundle name. Come here. Display name and then this as the bundle name. Name, bundle name. Yeah, so there we have it. Display name env tester and bundle name env test, all specified from the native side of things. So yeah, this basically eliminates the need of third-party dependencies. I don't need env package or flutter.env to set environment variables because I can always pass this. You should just not forget to specify the file holding the environment variable at compile time. One other advantage that this gives is that unlike flutter.env, where you have to specify the env file as an asset, you don't have to do this here, right? Take for one disadvantage of bundling your env file as an asset is that someone could unzip your APK, your Android APK itself is more or less a zip file. Someone could unzip it and see all assets that are there. And bundling your .env as an asset is problematic because anyone can unzip that APK file and see the .env, which is which is bad for business, right? So this is like the best way to go about it. Let the Flutter engine help you set your environment variables. No third-party dependency. No, yeah, no third-party dependency. So yeah, I think that's it for this session. I'm not sure if any other thing to show again. If there are questions, please ask. Yeah, so I forgot to show something. Yeah. So once how Flutter really passes this environment variable from your that side, the native side is as simple as this. At compile time, right, Flutter already generates this file for you. Generated xc config, this generated export config file, right? So every every Flutter configuration is passed down to the generated export config, which is made available to your release config if I generate a release application or your debug config and generating a debug configuration. If you check my generated xc config, you will realize that I have the Flutter build number, build name 1.0.0. This one comes from the PubSpec YAML, which is seen here. This 1.0.0, that's where it comes from. Else we have here. This Flutter build number 1 also comes from the PubSpec YAML after this plus, which is this. So this is like the build number, build name, and the build number, right? Then every other thing, if you notice, I passed app name, right? I passed app name as an environment variable. This is here, env test. I passed base URL, this is it here, right? I passed API key, this is here. I passed Google Map API key, this is here. I passed application ID, this is here. I passed iOS display name, which is this it. I passed iOS bundle name. So what if Flutter engine does this? Not really magic, right? It just helps you, it just generates the corresponding configuration file, right? And then bundles it as part of the debug and then the release config so that you can be able to call each of these variables on the native side of things. right? So that's exactly what is happening under the hood. Um, yeah. So thank you. If there are any question, I will take questions now.
Thank you so much, Sam, for the wonderful session. Okay, Azan Teslim, you can ask your question. So please, if you have any question, just raise your hand. Use the raise icon to raise your hand, then I'll call you. Then you ask your question.
Right, good evening. Thank you very much for your session. Right, so my question has to do with how to make compromises here. Uh, First, you showed us we could pass it via a file with the config.json and the env, but then you only showed us that it is only from the, I don't know if I assume that it is from the env file, we can only access those variables inside of the native side of things. Did I, is that correct? Or can we also do that if we had used the config file, the config.json file?
Yes, yes, absolutely. If you are using config.json, right, it's the same thing. If you use the config.json, the .env file, or you use the that define directly, right, you can also access the environment variable natively. Either approach you take, the environment variable are available to you natively.
All right. So you mentioned that one of these ways is bad because some kind of reverse engineering can be done on the app, like they can unzip it, use the word unzip, I don't know if that is it, and they can get those stuff out if we had used one of those methods. I'm not sure I get which one.
Yes, yes. So let me just share my screen. Let me move to pub.dev so I could show you what I was referring to. Um, so one very common way by which people attend to environment variable is by using packages like flutter.env, right? And what flutter.env does, right, is that it asks you to create a .env file, and then you set an environment variable key value, key value, key value, right? And then one key note is that you are adding the environment variable as part of your application assets in your Postgres YAML, as saying here, right? So while the documentation might have said, remember to add your .env as part of git ignore, one thing is that this .env is available as an application asset. Your .apk file that comes with Android is more or less a zip file, right? Which you could technically unzip. I mean, you could unzip any APK, like you could unzip an APK, right? And once you unzip this APK, it means I'm going to see this file lying there bare, right? Because it's part. You said it's part of the application assets, so I can just unzip it and see the .env file, right? Yeah. So that's what I explained earlier. So you don't want to do that. Um,
All right.
yeah. So across any text, it's not a Flutter thing, right? Even if you are working front end web, back end, right? Ideally, you are being told to pass the environment variable at compile time, right? And then you fetch it at runtime inside the project or the product or the application that's using it. So you don't bundle the env file as part of your application assets. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. So my last question is, so you just showed us how to do this in this debug app. What if you are working with a production app? Do we just add it the same way when we are building
Yeah.
for release? Or
It's the same thing, right? It's the same thing. It does not change. The command is available to you both in release mode, in debug mode, or profile mode. It's a command that's available in Flutter engine, but irrespective of your build mode. Okay.
that's all from mine. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Teslim, for asking your question. Do we have any other person that have questions to ask, or we all understand what went on in this class tonight? As the Agbada we are. I think I think no one has any question. All right. Okay, so Our class has ended, right? The materials will be available to everyone. The recording will be released. If you use the link to sign up for the class, you surely get an email from me, and the email will include the material for the class. That is the repo and the recording for the class, and any other thing Master Sam wants to share with everyone that attended the class today. And it's also be shared on Twitter. So if you're following the community on Twitter, you'll be able to like get the message, right? So that is all for today. I hope you had fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new or you added more things to your knowledge. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Thank you, Master Sam, for coming. And I'll see you next week, Friday.
Next Friday. What happened next Friday?